A man called Edmund Burke, he once said that all that is necessary for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing. All that's necessary for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing. I went to Australia in 2000, I think 13, 12 maybe. And it's a long flight, so from London to Kuala Lumpur and then from there to Sydney. And I bought a book for my travel reading about a young woman called Sophie Scholl. And the book was called Sophie Scholl and the White Rose Movement. And Sophie Scholl was an inspiring character, an amazing woman who was part of a movement called the White Rose Movement, and her brother Hans Scholl and friend Willy Graf and Professor Christopher Brops and a few others, they came out with this idea in Nazi Germany to come together and author leaflets denouncing Hitler. And they used to have these leaflets copied manually on a machine. Then they would take them across the major cities of Germany, of Ulm and Stuttgart and Munich, and distribute them en masse. And Hitler was so scared, in fact, he thought it was some kind of a Russian conspiracy. It's just 4 or 5 of them, 6 of them, activists who were just doing something to save their nation and to help the German people and to tell people about the evil of Hitler and so on and so forth. I came back, my return flight was on I landed back in London on the 22nd of February that year. And it was quite shocking to me that as I was coming to the end of the book, there is a part where Sophie Scholl and her brother Hans Scholl were in Munich University. They were distributing leaflets. They were leaving them at the columns or like places like these, so people could come out of class and just pick them up and read them. And they were caught on the 18th of February 1943. And then they had this kind of mock trial, and they were sentenced to death. And they were put under the guillotine on the 22nd of February 1943. That's the day that I returned, was on the same date, February 22nd. And so it's always stuck with me. I bought all of the books published, in fact, on English, on this character of Sophie Scholl. There are many people like that, of course, in the Nazi Holocaust, people that we would remember, people who tried the André Trocmé in France and the village of Le Chambon. Amazing, amazing priest, Christian priest who saved the lives of thousands of Jews. Or we think about people who took a militant approach like Colonel General Stauffenberg, who tried to assassinate Hitler, then he himself was executed. We think about people of courage during difficult, unsettling times, like in what happened in the Holocaust. Millions of people led to their deaths, innocent people. And then there arose some people, a few people, a handful of people who did something to try and change what was happening, what was going on. Edmund Burke, as I said that all that is necessary for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing. When Sophie Scholl was under the guillotine, they had a small thing in one of the Nazi newspapers about some activists who made a fool of themselves and was put to death. But in Germany today, there are more than 240 schools named in memory of Sophie Scholl and her brother Hans Scholl. In fact, Der Spiegel did a poll where they asked the Germans, who do you think is the greatest German woman in German history? And they voted Sophie Scholl as #1, right? And her old school called Ulm Gymnasium was now called Sophia Hans Gymnasium, you know. And so as the days pass in history, the narrative begins to change. Those who were once regarded as enemies of the state are now, of course, seen as the heroes and the saviors of the state that we're now living in. And I thought to myself, well, okay, that's great. There were, of course, many great people who did many great things to save many lives of innocent people. In the midst of this cloud of uncertainty and darkness and evil, there are also accounts of Muslims who tried their best to save the lives of other people, of Jewish people. There was, in 1942, there was a conference the Nazis held called the Wannsee Conference. And in the Wannsee Conference, they wanted to make a list to try and see how many Jews per European country had to be executed. And the number given as part of the final solution for Albania was around 200 or 300 something. And, but in 1943, September of that year, the Nazis invaded Albania. And so now, of course, the job is much easier because they are ruling the country. And when they invaded Albania, one of the first things they did was to get the Jews to register themselves with the government so that they could know where these Jews are living, where they are, in which district, in which town, so they could easily pick them up, then take them off to their death in the gas chambers or summary executed. Albania is a country, is a country at that time that had a population of around 7 million people. 7 million. And the Muslims were not that many in Albania. They were, of course, a majority in Albania, even today, but they were not that many. They also had Christians and different small Christian denominations in that country. And the Jews who were escaping from Austria and from Greece and from Serbia, who were fleeing the Nazis, also ended up in Albania. They all came there, in Albania. Now again, the Muslims, of course, had a role to play. What do? You have all these Jewish immigrants coming into your country, and the Nazis are ruling the country, and they want to kill all these Jews. What do? The Muslims in Albania did something remarkable, and it was a product of something that was integrated into their ethnic code, and it was also based upon their religion. So what they began to do is that they began to warn the Jews to flee the capital, Tirana of Albania, and go to the villages, the neighborhoods where Muslim Albanian families could look after them. And so as the Jews were arriving with their packs and their bags and everything, they began to tell them, look, this is not the place to settle, not in the capital city of Tirana, but go further afield, and we will ensure that Muslim families look after you. And they took that on trust. And it was two things that were motivating them. One was the ethnic code of the Bisa. The Bisa means to keep the promise. To keep the promise. And the other was what was founded in the Quran. And one of them said, Karim Kosepi said that our Bisa was from the Quran. Our idea of keeping the promise to humanity, of always ensuring that the next man is not harmed, of always ensuring that that spirit of brotherhood is extended, that people see the vitality and the beauty of Islam through you, that promise is maintained. Why do you think that when the people in Najran, they came and they said, Ya Rasulullah, send to us rajulan ameen, send us a truthful person, someone truthful. They could have asked, send us the most knowledgeable person out of all of you in Medina, send us the bravest warrior. No, they just said, send us the most transparent person, the most honest person. That's what they asked for. And so the Prophet says to them, لَأَبْعَثَنَّ إِلَيْكَ, I will send to you, إِلَيْكُمْ رَجُلٌ أَمِينٌ, I will send for you a truthful person, honestly, truly truthful and truly truthful. And they said, and each Sahabi is looking and thinking, maybe it's me, maybe I should be the one, I'm the one who's really honest. And the Prophet sent Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah radiallahu anhu. During the Khilafah of Umar radiallahu anhu, he once addressed his people and he said to them, tamannu, make a wish. One man gets up and he says, I tamanna, I wish I could have a room full of gold and I would use the gold, for Allah's sake. And he sat down. Umar said again, make a wish. And he said, I wish I could have the whole room full of diamonds and pearls and rubies and I would use them, in Allah's cause. The man said, Umar again said, make a wish. And the man, he said, you know what, why don't you make a wish? Why are you hearing our pathetic wishes? You make your own wish. And Umar says to them, I wish that if I had a room like this, full, not of gold, or of silver, or of diamonds, or of pearls or rubies, but full of men like Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah radiallahu anhu. What is it that would alleviate the problems of our world? Not just money and gold and silver. It is men of transparency, women of transparency, of justice, of goodness, of equity, of fair dealing, of truthfulness. And so Dustam Bella and Lime Bella, these two Albanian Muslims, they said, we were in Albania and these Jews came upon us. And we were so poor. We were poor Muslim peasants, villagers living they said that we didn't even have a dining table in our room. And the Jewish people came upon us, 16 Jews, and we sheltered them, and we clothed them, and we fed them, and we never made them ask we never made them ask for anything. We just gave them. And we never charged them, made them pay for food or for clothing or for shelter. And they said, because of our bisa, of our idea of keeping the promise, and because of what's founded in the Quran, Dustin Bella and Lime Bella. What an amazing, inspiring story of Muslims in Albania. So many of them. You had the case of Rafiq Veseli. Rafiq Veseli gives a story from the perspective of his parents. He says, my parents were devout Muslims who took Jews by the hand and walked up mountains and hid in caves and gave them food that they wanted to eat because they were so hungry, and let them drink water that they couldn't drink because they wanted to prefer others to themselves. And they were motivated by the bisa. Rafiq Veseli says that our bisa was from the Quran. That Allah made us the greatest of nations. Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnas. You are the best of all nations, take it out, linnas, for mankind. In that you command the good and you forbid the evil, and one of the greatest of evils, of course, is taking the innocent life of an innocent person. Right? And they upheld to that principle. Remarkable stories. When the Vichy government took control of Algeria, and the Vichy officials told the inhabitants of Algeria that if you seize control of Jewish property, you would have high profits. The Muslim imams in the mosques forbade the Muslims from stealing and taking Jewish property, confiscated Jewish property, because they said that's theft, and theft is forbidden in Islam. It is forbidden to steal somebody else's land. It is forbidden to steal somebody else's property. And they gave that message. Remarkable story. Example, Mirella Hassan was a Tunisian Jewish woman. And she said that, we were living under such fear and such panic that we didn't know if we were going to live the next day or what's going to happen. And she said that all I remember as a young girl is that it was a Muslim Arab woman who would come and nurse my sisters. She said, that's all that I remember. I don't remember anything else except that the one who would come and nurse my sisters was a Muslim Arab woman. And she said, sometimes in life, it is the small act, the small gesture of human kindness that in the most difficult scenarios, circumstances, makes the greatest difference. She said it enabled the saving of so many lives as it did for us. And she said, that's my humble testament. Or we might think about David Goez, Jewish man, who said that in the streets, we were so hungry, us Jewish children. We used to walk and there was no food for us. And sometimes if we were lucky, we would have a loaf of bread. But what I remember is that an Arab Muslim man would come and give me 2 loaves of bread rather than 1 loaf of bread. And he said, that's all I remember. That's my testimony. That a Muslim came to me to give me 2 loaves of bread. Or who would remember the case of Abraham Cohen? Abraham Cohen, whose family was escaping the Allied bombing of Tripoli, who said that, for us, the way that we saw the Arab Muslims was that they made us partners in everything. They didn't ask us, we're doing this, or tell us we're doing this for you, and this is who we are, and we're doing this, and now we want this in payback, in money. No. They made us partners in everything. They shared their homes with us, and they shared their food with us, and they shared their clothing with us, and their space in their homes with us. She said that they made us partners in everything. I remember I was in Pakistan this last year with our dead Ustad Adnan Rashid, and we were together in Islamabad, and his father, mashallah, blessed man. So I had to buy something for my daughter. She was 1 or 2 at that time. And so I saw a beautiful hat hanging in one of the, Pakistan, it's Pakistan. And so I said, I got to get this. And he saw me in the corner of my eye, trying to get money out of my wallet and seeing what's the rupees or what's the currency. And he saw that. And then he came running. And he came to the storekeeper and he paid him. And I said, no. I said, in Urdu, my broken. I said, it's okay. It's okay. I got money. And he said to me, no, he did this to me. He said, same. In English, broken English, he said, same. He was saying that my daughter is like your daughter. Your daughter is like my daughter. We are the same in the same. And I thought, what an amazing ethic to live by. If you see the similarity in others, right? We have a polarizing sometimes in our world of self and otherness. We see the supremacy of ourself, and we see the others as permanently others. Sometimes we look at the small things in those others, and those others they grow and they fester, and it leads to antagonism and hatred. But how about, there is something in the self that we see in the other, like the human element. That when those Muslims saw the Jewish people, they could see, of course, the same thing. We shed the same tears, and we laugh the same laughter, and we feel the same pain, and we have the same, fears, and so on and so forth. And they saw this, and they helped them. So Abraham Cohen, who could forget the story of Khalid Abdul Wahab? Amazing Muslim, Khalid Abdul Wahab, who overheard the Nazis talking about the rape of a Jewish woman. He overheard that. In the night, they're planning, they're plotting. And so what he does is he knew that Jewish woman and her family. And they had already escaped to somebody else's house to find refuge in that house. And so he drove in the night in his pickup truck, drove all the way to the Jewish family home, and he knocked on the door. They were the Bukris family. He was shocked because in that house were another Jewish family called the Uzan, 6 members of the Uzan family, all huddled together in one small space. He said, look, I've got to take you out of this home because something bad is about to happen. He took all of them out, put them in his truck, and then drove far away to a barn that he owned and kept them there in that barn to try and save their lives, disguised them as Muslims, gave the women the headscarves, gave the men the prayer beads, put out the prayer mats for them to make it look as though that they were Muslims, all for the purpose of saving the lives of others, of those who are in need, of those who are victims of aggression and injustice, to try and save the lives of others. What an amazing lesson that we learn as Muslims from this sacrifice, from this bravery, principle of justice. I remember when I was in school, there was a poem. I think if I start it, then all of you will remember it. And it's by the African poet Chinua Achebe, called Not My Business. And that poem, its lines ring true for all kinds of injustice in our world today. Sometimes we live in cliques. We like those who look like us, and we're comfortable and safe with those who look like us. And others, well, you look different, so therefore, to hell with you. Or those who talk like us, and those who do not, well then, to hell with you too. And so then in our minds, we all think, well, it's not my business because that's your business. So you deal with your own issues. You're starving, that's your business. You're thirsty, that's your business. You don't have any money, tough luck, that's your business. And in this poem, he began by saying they picked Akani up one morning and beat him soft like clay, and then stuffed him down the belly of a waiting jeep. What business of mine is it so long they don't take the yam from my savoring mouth? We are occupied. Stefan Assel, who was an Auschwitz survivor who died a few years ago, in fact, he wrote a book called Time for Outrage. The Nazis, Germans, they lived with the 3 Ks. A lot of them, too many of them. Called Kinder, Kurch, and Kitsch, I think. I don't speak German. Which is children, and the church, and the kitchen. That's it. That's enough to sedate people. You just worry about your children, and cook food for your husband, and pray in the church on the Sunday. And the world is well. and the world is well. Everything is good. Everything's fine. Don't worry about, don't look above the crowd, because if you look above the crowd, you might see the smoke. Don't do that. Just live as a human being, enjoy your life, be happy with the small things in life, and don't worry about what's happening outside to other people on earth. Stefan Hessel survived Auschwitz, and he wrote a book called Time for Outrage. Remarkable, small pamphlet of a book. And in the book, he has outrage over poverty, outrage over injustice. In fact, his penultimate chapter is outrage over Palestine. He says, the greatest indignation I have in the world today is for what's happening to the Palestinians. But it is his last sentence, or the last chapter, last paragraph in his book that I want to focus on, in that he says that we call for a mass public uprising against the means of mass communication that offer nothing but mass consumption as a prospect for our youth. General amnesia and the outrageous competition of all against all. He wrote that book at the age of 93. He died a few years ago. What he was saying is that if we as human beings are so involved in our small gizmos, always waiting for the next iPod, iPad, iPhone to come out, and that's the only thing that we think about, Black Friday, and people are pepper spraying each other on the face because they want the Xbox 360, if that's all that's keeping us ticking, keeping us going, you have no time then to worry about those who are suffering elsewhere, those who are starving elsewhere. You have no time for that because you're so self-consumed. You're consumed in your grief, in your greed. You're consumed in your greed, whereas one should be consumed partly in their grief, but consumed in their greed, always wanting more and more and more. And so we find in the Nazi Holocaust examples of Muslim bravery, examples of Muslims who put others before themselves, who saw that there is a calling. If you're living in a time and a place where people are suffering, then you have responsibility. In Chinua Achebe's poem, the second stanza, it runs and it says, and then came one evening and dragged Dan Laddie out, and then off to a lengthy absence. And you notice, of course, a euphemism in lengthy absence means death somewhere, in some gulag, right? You won't be seen again. But he says, what business of mine is it? So long they don't take the yam from my savoring mouth. Chinwe went to work one day. She's a woman, right? So injustice affects men and women. Only to find her job was gone. No warning, no query, no probe. Just one neat sack for a stainless record. And then how does it end? What is the end of the poem, the climax of the poem? And then one evening as I sat down to eat my yam, a knock on the door froze my hungry hand. The jeep was waiting on my bewildered lawn, waiting in its usual silence. The same enemy came to attack him. His indifference and turning his back on those who needed help at that time, now of course he became the victim. Like the Martin Niemöller, who famously said that, you know, they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a trade unionist. And they came for the communists, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a communist. And then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a Jew. And then they came for me, and then there was no one left to speak out for me. There was no one else left. Who would speak out for me? Nobody. And so one of the great things that we learn about the events of the Nazi Holocaust is that many great people did many great things to save the lives of other people. And we read their memoirs, the great people who sheltered Anne Frank, right? And so many others like her and him. Those who tried their best to arouse the awareness of the German people to what Hitler and the Nazis are doing. But in this time, at that time, there were also Muslims, like those that helped Mirella Hassan, or the one that helped David Goaz, or the one that helped Abraham Cohen, or people like Khalid Abdul Wahab, all the great people of Albania, and the Bisa, and keeping the honor, and keeping the promise, and uplifting the code, and living by the ethics of the Quran. All of these are examples for all of us, inshallah, to try and emulate. We ask Allah to make us of those who live by the best standards as defined by Allah in the Quran and in the Sunnah of His Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Jazakumullah khairan.